Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Prenatal Wellness Talks. Today, I'm so excited to have with us Nicole Moore, and we'll be talking about the impact of birth and early life experiences on human development. Thank you so much, Nicole, for being with us today. Such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Nicole is in Australia, and before we start our conversation, I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your work. What made you come to the birth world?
Yeah, so my story is that, I've been a seeker all of my life. I was one of those children that, deeply sensitive soul, and so started asking big questions very early. And uh, that led me to explore all kinds of different spirituality. I traveled a lot in my early 20s. And then by the time I was having children, um, you know, the questions of why are we here and how can we optimize it, which is basically what, when you're searching for happiness or searching for answers, that's what it's about. It's like, how can we optimize this human experience? uh, how can we live in love consistently? These were questions that, as soon as I started to feel maternal, even before I had my children, started to turn the lens onto the next generation. And so I went on to have two very blessed births. I'm very fortunate in that I was surrounded by a strong home birth community. I was able to birth my babies on the land, in water, but on the land. Which in Australia, on the land means, in the bush. Like, I was living off grid at the time. And so, surrounded by the natural elements. And yeah, with a fire inside I actually gave birth in a teepee. We set it up as a beautiful birth space. And so I had a fire, I had a big birthing pool. I was in the forest. It was absolutely divine. And I was very supported, not only by my midwife and a beautiful doula that she was working with, who has gone on to be a lifelong friend, um, but the community that I was living in at the time as well, where a lot of the women had given birth at home. And so the stories and the imprints that were handed down to me just by osmosis of knowing, that my younger friends, like their children, I knew their birth stories. I knew how they had come into the world, which house they were born in, or which garden, and all of that had a wonderful effect. And so applying those big questions of why are we here and how can we make it better, to the birthing experience, and then having these amazing births with, a full flood of oxytocin and kind of mind expanding, heart expanding experiences, I just became like, everyone has to know. The whole world has to know about this. I was making films already by that, at that time of my life. And so I immediately started to think, how can I communicate about this? Because I knew about how many, for example, elective cesareans. I didn't know much about the birth trauma that was happening in the hospital system here in Australia, but I did know that there was a lot of unnecessary elective cesareans. I could see that even in my own extended family. And I just felt like people were robbing themselves of an opportunity that was so, I enjoyed it so much that I thought people have to know about this. And so, like all good filmmakers and journalists, I thought I'll I'll make a film about it. So I started researching every film that had ever been made about home birth and physiological birth, which led me to Elena Tanetti Vladimirova, the maker of the film Birth as We Know It, which a lot of people in the natural birth world know that film. It's a kind of iconic film. Uh, and then and she came to Australia, we put on a workshop. That was in 2009, and basically my life hasn't been the same since.
Good for
We
us,
had
good for us, because then we know you now.
Yeah. And I'm very happy to be able to take those skills, like the filmmaking skills, and kind of channel them into something. I have not yet made the film that I feel like is still deeply, deeply gestating about the power of birth. But that's because when I saw Birth as We Know It, I thought, well, that's been done. You know, um, the concepts in that film were completely aligned with my own thoughts and feelings. And so it was a natural progression to, at some point, somebody reached out saying that Elena was traveling Australia and she was looking for a few different venues. And so, of course, I put up my hand to host her. And it made a lot of sense to just get in with her slipstream and work alongside her. And she's been an amazing teacher and mentor, and I'm now the sort of senior facilitator of the Birth into Being work, which basically means that I'm holding the organization, but I'm also training the next generation of facilitators. And it's an incredible honor because it's a powerful body of work that yeah,
And
I'm so
let's
happy to
let's talk
contribute.
a little bit about the concept of limbic imprint that you talked about. How have you seen it manifest in people that you work with?
Hmm. I'm just going through the files, the mental files, to come up with an example that is really straightforward, because sometimes it's quite a nebulous zone. But I think the issue of trust is a good place to start, because we all understand that we need to have some degree of trust in order to take risks and do things, like to put yourself forward for a new job, to call that guy that you fancy, to maybe parent differently than you were parented, and that maybe your family, your extended family is modeling one way of parenting, but your heart tells you that another way would be better. And you have to have some degree of trust in yourself and in the world. And there's so many different places that we require trust. And if our trust has been undeveloped because of strongly stressful experiences in the womb, then we find it difficult to take those risks, to make those steps, to be self-initiating. And consequently, that means, is our life less fulfilling than if we were able to take those risks? Anyway, the concept of limbic imprinting lies in that in those very, very initial stages of life, we have the capacity to build trust by having a regulated nervous system, by having like experiences that we are then nurtured through. So like, let's say a baby in the womb, there's a loud noise, but then very quickly afterwards comes mum's assurance that everything is okay. And the mother's physiological changes that we know has a direct impact on the baby's physiology. If the mother returns to regulation quite easily and relatively quickly, so too will the baby. And when that is kind of like step by step built, as like big things happen and then we recover, and then other big things happen and then we come back, and always there is somebody there assuring you it's all good, mummy's got this. Mum is doing what she needs to do to regulate herself, which in turn regulates the heartbeat, the blood pressure, all the things that show us that a baby has been affected. And when that begins in utero and continues through the birth experience by having minimal drama in birth. And it's always going to be a strong experience. That's just how it is. It's kind of, it's one of the biggest events of our lives, of course, but it doesn't need to be full of drama and panic and stress with high cortisol spikes. And so when the nervous system is developed in a steady way, with lots of repair and recovery, then it builds a certain degree of resilience, and that becomes the baseline. So I'm just going to very quickly show you my little guy. Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a guy. My brain. We have here the cortex, which is the part of the brain that develops last. And we have the limbic system here. And we know that the limbic system is the part of the brain that governs our emotional responses to things. So not just things like, stress and panic, but also the capacity to have a flow of oxytocin, which we know is available to us in really big doses in birth. And I'm just going to share a picture. This is Lynette Nielsen's fabulous book, A Child is Born. I think he was Swedish photographer, and he won awards. Amazing photography. A Child is Born is the name of the book. And this photograph is one of my favorites. It's a 5-week-old fetus, and you can see that the spinal cord is developing, and the nervous system, and the limbic system of the brain is the first part of the brain to develop. And what that means is that sometimes even before a mother has realized that she's pregnant, the baby is growing in response to and along the lines of her experience. So if she's living in like extremely high levels of cortisol, like living in a really stressful situation, unsupported in her pregnancy, maybe doesn't want to have the baby, this is all creating neural pathways for the baby that have a tendency, as opposed to she is ready to be a mother. She is in love with her partner. They are recognizing that they're bringing in new life and they couldn't think of anything better to do. And they're supported and there's no financial stress. There's no, big life events happening because the community around them is also somewhat protecting them and not bringing their problems to the pregnant woman. Like all of that would also have an incredibly strong impact on the baby. And this is the concept of limbic imprinting, whereby our brains have a capacity or greater capacity for that which they have been imprinted with. And then we replicate that throughout our lives.
Yeah, and even on that replication that you are talking about, many of us still carry ancestral and early childhood wounds. And how can we help to heal these difficult experiences from our own birth or from our early life, and consciously repair them, these early imprints, especially when those are, rooted in our life experience in stress or a disconnection from love? How can we do this, especially during pregnancy? Because a lot of these concepts, sometimes women are just learning about it and they are pregnant.
Yeah, and that's fits perfect. Pregnancy is so transformational in so many ways, and I think that a big part of that is that we do start to look for new information when we're carrying a baby. All of a sudden, the dial is turned up on our desire for life to be perfect, or better or more easeful, or, you know, all of a sudden when we have the responsibility of another being, we go, oh, now I must fix these things, you know. So it means that it's also quite a busy time in pregnancy when we've got all these new ideas and, you know, we have to learn about birth. And saying that, the what can we do about it? Well, the first thing is that when we have an awareness of limbic imprinting, when we understand the impact, potentially lifelong impact on our baby, we can make different choices around what we choose for ourselves, that taking on that responsibility and thinking, you know, which of course is part of the beautiful symbiosis as well, because if we make different choices because that's what we want for our baby, we're also making different choices for ourselves. You know, like, I want my baby to be happy, well then I need to be happy, and maybe that means I need to set some boundaries, or I need to drop this demanding job or whatever. What's really important to me is that people don't whip themselves with this kind of information, you know, because we live in a fractured world. It is not always possible to live in bliss. Life still happens. Things happen in pregnancy that are beyond our control, and it's important not to whip ourselves with this information or make life any harder. What the awareness can do is to let us know that communicating with the baby and saying, whoa, that was a really big event. Mummy was really stressed for a minute there. I'm doing my best to come back. I'm going to do what it takes. I'm going to prioritize that long bath. I'm going to go for that walk in the forest. I'm going to, you know, take care of this, and I'm going to communicate that to my baby, that it was big, it was hard, and I'm still here. The same way as we wish in life, you know, when our babies are born and they're children, you know, it would be so wonderful if we could protect them from everything difficult in the world, and unfortunately we can't. Same with our babies in utero. We can communicate with them and let them know that we're still here, our love is unwavering, we are, you know, going to be here all the way through, you know.
Yes,
We
they
can,
feel that they are seen. I had a guest also telling us that sometimes it's hard for mothers and couples to speak with their baby if, as that consciousness that already is. It's not yet being formed, but already is. And just like talking with an adult, like reaffirming, you know, mommy is having these strong emotions, but it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the situation that mommy is passing through. And then teaching the baby in the womb that these challenges can actually be overcome. And you wrote a recent article to our blog about birth being a portal for deep transformation and healing. And how do you support mothers to prepare emotionally and spiritually for these precious moments in the life of a mom and a baby?
yeah. Well, that's the part of the previous question that I didn't get to as well, which is what can we do about it? Um, so with the birth into being method, we are looking at birth not just through the lens of a mother preparing to give birth to her baby, but also through the lens of the fact that we were all born. And for many of us, this was not an optimal circumstance. And what can we do about that now? And the thing that, you know, the method that we are working with is that we are creating new limbic imprints. So it's a whole thing that I could go on about for hours. So I'll try to give the very short version. We go through a number of different steps to invite in to a person's consciousness new imprints of their early life. So when a person feels that early period, and they might not know the actual story, sometimes their parents have died, the information isn't there. They might not know the actual story of their biological birth, but if they have a strong feeling that they could have been better nurtured through that period, that the qualities that they're hoping to um, to hold in their life today, that they're somehow feeling unsupported by their early life experiences, then we can go back to these early life experiences and have, it's very creative processes that give the person a new imprint. And of course, the initial story remains. The initial imprints are there, and we can create new ones for the nervous system to kind of sit in parallel with. And they're very, we do a number of different steps to activate the person's intention, so that this invitation for them to take it in is very strong. Usually also, because our workshops around the world, sometimes people have traveled a long way to get there. We try to do it in beautiful venues, so there's costs involved. And all of this contributes to the person being really open and receptive to these new imprints. They've really done their best to be able to get themselves into an environment. And then even if there's a little bit of resistance, because our limbic imprints can also be defined as the uncomfortable comfort zone. So even if it's uncomfortable, it's still somehow comfortable and habitual, and it's been with you your whole life. So there can be some resistance to inviting in something new. But when all these different steps have gone through, we also work with the body a lot to loosen up the body and the mind to allow these new imprints in. It's just in a similar way to when we watch a movie or we see something in the theatre, we hear a beautiful song, and oftentimes we have a strong emotional response, and we can even have a physiological response. Like when I watch scary movies, I sweat, and my breath is shorter, my heartbeat goes up, and I sweat. Like I can be in a full panic because I don't watch a lot of movies. And then when I do, they have a really strong impact. Likewise, when we are inviting in these new experiences that are created in either a workshop or a one-to-one setting, we have not just a mental invitation, but we have a heart response and a body response. And this kind of multi-sensory approach is what I think makes our method so effective, because you're not just working with the mind.
And you want to talk about the role of unconditional love. You talked about that also on the article, how unconditional love is important in the birth process in the early postpartum period. Why is that?
Love is all we need. That's the simple answer? No, like I've talked a lot about stress this morning, but the antidote to stress is oxytocin and love. And it feeds us on so many different levels, and it allows us to be open and expanded and receptive. So when I was talking about trust, when we have been habitually flooded with oxytocin, when we have had many, many experiences of oxytocin, and that is our baseline, then that is what we go out into the world expecting to meet. We bring it to others, we receive it, and it's just this like beautiful flow. And I think that this is not only important as a setting a foundation for each individual, but it helps birthing mothers to open, for their cervix to open and the baby to just, come out the way that we were meant to, without all these complications and drama. And then it also helps those children go out into the world with open, loving hearts and a receptivity. And, I believe that this state of receptivity and of willingness to try, to make mistakes, to feel, and to work with people instead of feeling like guarded and closed. When we're in this like flow, and that's our baseline, we can do so much. And also our love, not just for each other and within our species, but across species and towards our planet. Like you think, we all know that there's things that we can do and should do to be more environmentally responsible. And sometimes it's hard to continue to make those choices. For example, when it comes to buying organic food, when you're running a family, and the expense can be double. It can be hard to make those choices. But when you have a really strong love for the earth, then there's no compromise. And also when you have that baseline of oxytocin, then that is also what you're aspiring to in all your relationships. So you treat your garden and your home and the forests around you, you treat your children and the other children in your life,
Yeah, you
the
feel
community
in
around
love,
you.
you feel in tune, you feel connected, isn't it? That's the third.
Yeah,
You feel connected, you feel part of nature. Nature is not outside of you, it's moving through you. It's a whole
absolutely.
different experience. And do you believe that us as human beings collectively are ready to evolve through this personal healing, this conscious parenting? Because it's work, it's inner work that needs to be done. And what gives you hope? What is your experience on that?
What gives me hope is that I see it already happening. It is already happening. So I mentioned before that I spent a lot of time living in community, and I birthed my children, raised my children that way. All over the world, there are people who are aspiring to live together in love. There are people who are aspiring to tread gently on the earth. There are people who are minimizing their environmental impact. They are raising their children consciously. It is a massive wave. It might not yet be the dominant paradigm, but it is strong, and it is no longer what we would call subversive or alternative. It is coming. Unfortunately, world chaos is also kind of peaking, but the archetypal story of the world is good versus evil. And what I'm talking about with this like capacity to build and hold love, this is good, you know. And as you can see, like it spreads across not just the human experience, global earthly experience. And I have absolute hope because I see it already in action. And I see it in the way that the little girls in my, well, not just little girls actually, but the little people in my world, when they play dollies, they're carrying their little dollies in their baby carriers. They the first my son is 23. We've had the first baby just born from his contemporaries, who was a boy slightly older, a young man, who is 25, and he's just had his first baby, and the baby, so it's the first of that next generation. And the way that they are holding all of it, the pregnancy, the birth, and now this beautiful little baby, the way that they're supported by all of us, the older generation. And I'm just like a quasi auntie, like no blood relation, but I raised this boy alongside his birth family. and this network of love, like it's real and it's there. So, and I'm about to go and present some stuff at some stuff, the birth into being method and associated philosophies, at a birth festival in Kauai, where they have a really strong home birth community. And, you know, and even in the face of all these legalities and the witch hunts that are happening with midwives around the world, uh, this birth community and this belief in the power of birth to continue to cultivate our capacity to be a loving species, it is strong. So that's why I believe in it. It's not an idea, it's happening.
And if there is one message that you would like to bring forward to someone that is, listening to us and preparing to, bring a child to the world from the perspective of, evolving into love, into connection, into nature, what would be that advice that you would bring to someone preparing for pregnancy and for birth?
Trust your heart. Go for gold. Don't accept anything less than what you know is best for yourself and your baby. There are ways to find your path, you know, and it might take time and spaciousness and some inner work. For sure, it takes some inner work, and it might take looking at your own birth. So, to find that path and to clear, what is in your own field in order to support what's going on for your baby. And that's where, we touched on it before about birth being such a transformational experience. Yeah, it offers so many opportunities for exploration. And so, that's my golden nugget, is take the opportunity and believe in your heart.
Thank you so much, Nicole. It was such a great time to have you here with us and to listen to your words. And we'll keep up the links here of all your information and the good work that you're doing at the birth community. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you for all your work with the Prenatal Alliance. It's a very important message, and it's so wonderful that there are people like you dedicating your time and energy to spreading this information. It's very important work.
Thank you.